Thank you. Do you need this? Yeah, James is going to come up. Well, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. This is a great privilege. I'm representing also Bethesda Mission. Bethesda Mission isn't on our campus like the missions that we've heard about recently, but we're only about 15 minutes away, right in downtown Harrisburg. And if you're a man who comes to Bethesda Mission and you either get off the train and walk to the mission, or you get out of a car, or maybe you just walk to the mission from where you were sleeping on the street, first thing you see when you get there are these two huge banners, House of Mercy, and then you got 15 steps that you have to climb. And the guys often talk about the 15 steps. If you're a woman and you go to the women's mission, you've got a big iron gate that you have to walk through. And it's almost as though there's no turning back. And the people that are coming here are usually admitting that they need help. They can't do it themselves. Maybe they've reached the end of the rope or hit rock bottom. And it's taken a big step on their part to be willing to say, I can't do this anymore, or I can't do it myself. And they come to Bethesda Mission, and one of the first things they're hit with is the promise that while you're here, you are safe, we care about you, and Jesus can change your life. And then we go from there. And some people are there for a short amount of time, whether they need just help to get something in place, or maybe they just need to start over, and they go through our recovery program, and we see some radically changed lives. I brought a friend with me this morning. His name is James, and he wants to come up and share with you how God has changed his life through what's been going on at Bethesda Mission with him. So, James. He's also waiting to get a hip replacement, so you're going to be able to juggle all three of these.
Oh, wow, look at this. Good morning, church. Morning. I don't know about you, but I feel God's presence in here like you wouldn't believe. Like you would think I'm probably nervous because these are all strangers, but you're not. These are all followers of Christ, so we're all family. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you. This is great. Now, I only have but so much time, but bear with me. I'm going to try to keep this narrow like the faith walk is supposed to be, okay? I want to title this devotion and testimony that's very personal to me. I am so privileged that I get to share this with you guys. It's amazing. It's titled, God's Grace, Mercy, and the Incredible Radical invitation that I've been invited to. It's incredible. God's hospitality, and ironically, the house of Bethesda Mission, and I'm sure you guys have probably heard stories of the Bethesda pool. And at this place, I got to experience something so supernatural that I prayed last night. I missed a lot of sleep last night because I prayed that you guys get to experience the supernatural feeling that I got of forgiveness when I realized that the person I used to be has been forgiven and forgotten about. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of war stories of what kind of sinner I was or still am. But the thing is, I am free from chasing after something that I will never be able to catch. And that's money, power, and sex. I've been able to walk away from that with the grace of God. And thank you. And my testimony began, its humble beginnings began at the mission. And I encourage anybody that is having any sort of trials and tribulations, and whether if you're a young person and you're just trying to find your way in life, or you're a senior citizen, a boomer, and you're like, I don't know where I'm going after. But if you keep your faith in God and just keep it simple, even a 12-year-old could be able to comprehend exactly what you need to do to inherit the kingdom of God. And for the young people, my pronouns are kingdom man. And for the older, I'm a child of God, and I believe I'm going to inherit the kingdom. And it's simple. But I just want to get back to, I just want to cover this real quick. This is fantastic. I'm going to wrap this up in a moment. These devices are not completely evil. They're pretty useful. So I was able to write that down. In Matthew 25:35, when I showed up at the mission, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I am not from Harrisburg, and I was invited into the mission as a stranger. Right there, that day, that night, March 12th, I experienced God's grace in real time. And nobody could tell me that I'm just being delusional. That really happened. And I prayed last night that everybody in the sound of my voice gets to experience that supernatural event at some point. Well, if I'm speaking to the choir that you guys already experienced that, great. But for those that need hope, I pray that God shows his hospitality to you today. Welcome it in. I encourage you to welcome it in today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. The side effects are little to none. The consequences, little to none. It outweighs anything opposite of this faith walk. And it's wonderful. As soon as you start, you will be given a family. My family is huge. And they welcome me. And they teach you how to do exactly that. I like food. I found out in discipleship, so does Jesus. So I'm learning how to extend that invitation as well. Eat some food, have good conversation, and show the fruits. I'm not someone that's a Bible thumper, but I keep it really simple. I also had this here for in case anyone is curious. Where am I getting this from? I'm practicing fruits daily. And you can find it in Galatians 5:22 through 23. If you stick with that, I guarantee you this faith walk becomes easy and you'll be able to identify the fruits in your fellow neighbor, man, and whoever else that you come in contact with. And it might give opportunity to lift someone's spirits and give them a moment of hope. And once you have experienced that sensation of hope and you're able to play it forward, it's amazing. And I'm glad I've been privileged enough and got to live long enough to be born again and pass the message forward. Thank you for your time.
Well done. James referenced Galatians chapter 5, and that's where we're going to go for a few minutes in the scriptures. As you've already heard, our theme for this weekend is Galatians 6:2. Bear one another's burdens. That might sound daunting to you. I don't want to do that. That's scary. I don't know how to do that. I understand. Before we get into Galatians 6:2, we need to look at a little bit about what Paul's already been talking about. 2 weeks ago in his message, Pastor Brian explained to us one of the important steps of doing proper Bible study. And he emphasized the concept of when you run into a hard passage, and we were looking at a passage there in Hebrews, he said you always want to make sure that you look at the easy passages, the passages that are easy to understand, and you use those passages to help understand the hard passages. I'm going to give us another Bible study principle this morning, and that's to always look at context, to try to figure out what is the author, the guy who wrote this, what's he trying to say? What's he getting at? Because probably our interpretation is not going to be something that Paul never intended for his original audience. And so we've got to understand, even as we look at Galatians chapter 6, that Paul has been dealing with a topic here through most of the book. He's written this letter to these churches in the Galatia region because it appears that somehow, some way, legalism has crept into the church, and the believers are insisting that they follow principles of the Old Testament law along with faith in Jesus Christ. And so that Paul writes to them and says, what's going on here? And you've really corrupted your faith as you're insisting, and the topic at hand is circumcision, and they were actually trying to force the new Gentile converts to become circumcised. And Paul has to write to them and say, no, that's not it at all. Your faith, and in fact, he even says, faith comes by, or doesn't have anything to do with your works. And in fact, that's one of the big lies that Satan wants us to believe. The lie that we can make ourselves righteous. Can't happen. Cannot happen. Faith in Jesus Christ, his shed blood. My way to heaven is because of the grace of Jesus Christ in my life, and nothing more. And it has nothing to do with, after I trusted Christ, do I have to follow these rules or these principles? And that's what Paul's been talking about through the first 5.5 chapters. And he gets to the middle of chapter 5, and he points out to them, he says, brothers, in verse 13, he says, we've been called to freedom. Our life isn't cemented in these laws that we have to follow, or these rituals, whether it's the laws that the Pharisees had put in place, or the laws that maybe a church or a religion might put in place now. No, we're not tied to that. We have the freedom from the bondage of these laws. Over in Matthew chapter 23, it's the last week of Jesus' life on earth, and he gets into a long discussion with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes. They're trying to trip him into saying something that's wrong so that they can use it against him. And they've asked him this series of questions, and he's come back with answers that just blew them away. And when that's finished, it says basically at the beginning of chapter 23, he turns to the people and he says, you need to realize what the Pharisees are like. I'm happy I was not a Pharisee there then, because that would have been incredibly uncomfortable. I'm sure it was for those guys. But he says some things like, he looks at the people and he says, they're tying up these large pieces of bondage, these burdens, and they're forcing you to carry them, these weights that are just wearing you down. So he basically says the exact opposite of our theme verse, where we're told to bear one another's burdens. He's accusing the Pharisees of piling on and making the people's religious lives more difficult and hard. And he rebukes them for that. He also points out that they had been tithing in ways that we might not even be able to imagine. They weren't just tithing their salary. They were tithing every small crop that they were growing in their gardens. He mentions, you've been tithing the small crops, but he says, but you've neglected justice and mercy and faithfulness. They were so bent on keeping the rules. And in their position, the position of being able to minister to people, they failed to minister to the people underneath them. Back in Galatians, Paul now is going to address, and we don't have time to go through all this, but through the rest of chapter 5, he's going to give a comparison to some characteristics of a person's life that makes it so that I can't work with other people. I can't, as Paul tells them earlier, to love one another and serve one another. He reminds us of the conversation that Jesus had earlier, where he reminds us that not only do you use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And then starting down in verse 19, he lists some activities that people get involved with that can absolutely not enable you to be able to love and serve one another. And just to pick out some, he mentions enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness. How can you be working? How can you be helping others? How can you love others if those are the things that are evident in your life? Well, we can't. But then he immediately turns it around and he gets to the passage that James referred to with the fruit of the Spirit. He says, but this is what you need to be showing: love, joy, peace. And he mentions a handful of different characteristics that need to be evident in our life. Makes sense. And then as we get into chapter 6, now he's going to talk about two different items that help us see how I can be involved with one another. And the first thing he mentions is, and he says, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. So here as we begin chapter 6, Paul is addressing the idea that we've got a believer who has been caught in some kind of a sin, doesn't identify what it is, doesn't say what the circumstances are, the how, when, or why, but he's looking at the believers and he's saying this needs to be a concern because we want people to remain in fellowship with Jesus Christ. And so the term there that's used for transgression is just the typical word to mean fall. A fall, a lapse, a fall into sin. And the objective here is restoration. The objective isn't condemnation. The objective isn't to point a finger and rebuke and ridicule, but the objective is to restore somebody back into a good relationship with Jesus Christ. And he even tells us how to do it gently. Gently. James also mentioned the pool of Bethesda there in John chapter 5. And that word Bethesda, and it's the only place that it's found in the Bible, is a combination of two words. And it's a combination of the word that means house, and it's a combination of a Hebrew word that's, to me, one of the greatest Hebrew words there is. I don't know if you have a favorite word. That word chesed is my favorite word. If my wife would let me, I would get that word tattooed on my arm. I'm dead serious. We've had this conversation, and it's not going to happen. Okay? But if she'd let me, my boss at Bethesda Mission has one of God's, in Hebrew, he's got one of God's terms, the word for God, El Roy, on his arm. And I thought, man, that's cool. I'd love to get the word chesed. It's the word that in the Old Testament means, basically it means covenant loyal love. You pick up any English Bible and pretty much every Bible translates that word differently because we just don't have one English word that translates chesed. King James has mercy. The New American Standard has loving kindness. Loyal love has been used. But that's what that word Bethesda means. It's a combination of a house, and so we call it the house of mercy. And so as a man or a woman comes broken and in need of whatever and comes to the Bethesda mission, they are going to be met with people that want to reach out to them and build into their lives and help them. We have people who not only do we tell them, here's what you need to do, but we teach the scriptures to them. We share different things about recovery. We've got recovery classes that are involved drug and alcohol information. But we don't all just tell them what needs to happen. We help them through the process. Help them get set up with doctor appointments. And then drive them to doctor appointments if needed. Help them to get a Social Security card or a government ID. Take them to PennDOT to do things like that. And when those kind of things happen, then we've even got more opportunity to just build into their lives one-on-one. And I treasure the times where I get to just drive one-on-one and take a guy to his meeting with his parole officer, or take a guy down to PennDOT or something, because now I'm gonna have his undivided attention for 5 or 10 minutes in the car, and that's usually a good thing. But the restoration here that's taking place, I'm reminded of one other thing that Pastor Brian said in his message 2 weeks ago. Not that I don't remember anything from last week, but 2 weeks ago he also brought out Hebrews 3:13 2 weeks ago. Exhort one another while it is today. And that second part of that is so that, and there's a growth process there, because he's warning about believers who have there also gotten caught up in some problems. And he's encouraging us to exhort so that that doesn't happen. So as we build into one another's lives, we're not just observing and seeing we've got a problem and then helping them fix it, but also helping to prevent problems, if that makes sense. And then in verse 2, he points out that we need to bear one another's burdens. And that bearing of burdens, and I love how he points out, and so fulfill the law of Christ. He's used the word law there, and he used the word law over in the middle of chapter 5, where the people have been all caught up in we've got these laws. We have to follow the laws. And Paul's saying, no. Here's the law. The law is to follow Jesus. The law is not the rituals. The law is loving with all of our heart. And this is the law. To bear one another's burdens is an example. And, that word bear just means to be taking up, to use with your hands to help. So it's not just, hey, I'll pray for you. But it's rolling up your sleeves and getting involved. Somebody might need help doing this. Somebody else might need some encouragement. Somebody else might need something else. I'm currently taking a workshop class through the American Association of Christian Counselors. And just this past week, we were talking about this topic in class, and my professor gave an example. And he just shared this short example with us. And he said it had been an incredibly difficult week. I think he mentioned that someone close to his family, it may have been his mom, died, but there were some really, really difficult things that happened over the week. And on Sunday, somebody came up to him and said, hey, how's it going? And he thought he knew the person well enough to be able to be honest with him. See, usually when people ask us that question, we're not honest. All right? How's it going? Oh, it's fine. Yeah, good. Yeah, me too. Good. And then we go our separate ways. Well, he shares and he says, it's been a hard week. I've had this. And he said the guy kind of took a step back and said, well, I hope it gets better, and took off. And he just shared how I felt hopeless. Like I got no help at all. But as I wrap this up, and Brian, I am wrapping it up. I mentioned, sometimes we're not straightforward. And we're polite, we ask not hoping for the correct answer, or we don't really want that answer. We just want to hear I'm fine. And we say I'm fine, but we have to be willing to respond properly, and we have to be able to react properly. And so I've just got three things to remind you as I wrap up. We all have trials, okay? Burdens are real. We all experience them. We all go through them. We have hardship in our lives, and there's some times that we cannot do life alone. We just can't do it. And we need that help. And one of the biggest things that most of the guys have to learn once they come to Bethesda Mission is to get rid of that concept that I can do it myself, because they can't. And in fact, that's usually one of the things that we can see if somebody's ready for change. They've got to get rid of that. I can do this myself. So the guy that's telling me, oh, I really don't need to come to recovery classes because I can manage this, is probably going to fail. We might see them again in a couple months, and hopefully they'll be willing to, okay, I'm ready now. But whether we understand that our burdens are real, we can't do life alone, and we've got to be willing to both share our burdens and to help people with their burdens. And if we can accomplish that, and think about the ministries that we've been exposed to already today, and the more that we'll see over in the gym, is that we're reaching out to different types of people. And I know there's some over there that you're even going to be exposed to that are even different than what you've seen already. And we're trying to help you understand that there are many different, what we call parachurch organizations that are coming along next to the church. We're not the church. We don't claim to be the church, but we need the help of the church. The help of the church to be able to accomplish what we can do, and to come alongside of you to be able to reach out to the full spectrum of people who need help under the care of God. And that's Bethesda Mission, and that's Galatians 6:2, bearing one another's burdens. Thank you for the opportunity.